All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I know that it's been a big year, and we're so excited to be with you as we're sort of reorienting ourselves and kind of reconnecting through this. So my name is Chi Kim, and I am the CEO of Pure Edge. And I reside in Boston, outside of Boston, and it's finally 40 degrees, a balmy 40 here. So it's great. And Teri, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Teri Lawler, Education Associate for Trauma Informed Practices and Social and Emotional Learning at Delaware Department of Education. And just glad to be here with you all. We've had some very sunshiny days the last few days. I wouldn't call it balmy because I'm originally from Virginia. And so my idea of warmth and cold is very different than Delawareans, but we're getting there, and hopefully Puxatawny Phil was correct and we will have spring soon.
Whew. Yes, right. That would be great. And our session's reciprocity of self-care to build equity and inclusion. And we're very excited just for this whole process. We want to thank Tracy for the invite. I have never met anyone who can single-handedly do something like this just by sheer will and heart and strength. And so we want to thank Tracy for her dedication and also her love of getting us all together. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I know we've already sort of responded to where you are coming from. We've got folks from all over the country, and we're so happy that you're here. But before we get started, I just wanted you to just take a look at this image. What do you see? And you can just put it right into the chat box. What do you see? Yeah, you're going to either see a bunny or a duck. So if you talk, and some people, I know I've done this before, some folks can't actually see either one. So if you see from the eye and go to the left, you can see a duck. If you go the eye to the right, you can see a bunny. The reason why, and I'm sure you've seen this image before, the reason why we're showing this today is just that we're all coming from a different perspective. And just to remind us that, you know, there's no right or wrong. It's just a perspective that we bring, and how we bring ourselves to the table is just as important as what we bring to the table. So we want to just share that with you. So thanks for partaking on that. And we also wanted to remind you of the three most important aspects. It's been in the literature and in the research. The three most important aspects of learning are attention, focus, and memory. And they're all controlled by our emotions, not by our cognition. And when we start talking about educating mindfully, just how we show up into the space, our emotions are actually driving how we learn, what we want to learn, and if we're motivated to even pursue something in that vein as well.
A little background. Our command control for our emotions sits in the middle of the brain, and it's the limbic system. The effectiveness of the limbic system's wiring or connections depend on the core strengths of attachment, being securely connected with caregivers and community as children get older, attunement, being in sync with those caregivers, and then self-regulation. And Jewel hit on a little bit of that earlier, just the importance of attachment to our ability to connect and have agency over our emotions. When the brain is stressed, these pathways are disrupted. And when those pathways are disrupted for extended periods of time, the brain can be forever changed. And so it's with that in mind that social, emotional, and behavioral health of children and youth is dependent upon the resilience of educators and the adults in their lives. Mm-hmm. Clearly, the pandemic and the uncertainty of this time has been stressful for all of us. Okay, you can see from this slide just some of the challenges that we have had to sit with as a result of the last 10, 11, almost 12 months. Mm-hmm. And who would have thought? But what we've seen in the literature are increases in health-related fears as well as chronic health. I've heard so many times lately that sitting is the new smoking. Okay, so while we have successfully pivoted to be able to work from home, we're sitting more, much more than we have in the past. Our isolation, being disconnected from friends and family members, all of those things have taken a toll. And then add to that just challenges with the unbelievable amounts of social and societal unrest, and just what that has done to us during this time period. Next slide, please. It is irresponsible and costly for us to do nothing. And so that's why it's important for us to focus on stress in schools. Okay, we lose billions of dollars in teacher turnover, with 40% of new teachers leaving the profession within 5 years, half of our administrators leaving the profession within 3 years. Stress is contagious. When our educators are highly stressed, their students show more signs of anxiety, less social adjustment, and their academic performance suffers. We must consider the cost of not attacking this universally. It's actually imperative that we focus on reducing stress and building coping skills to facilitate well-being in our school communities. Stress, compassion fatigue, and burnout are toxic in the body. The vast majority of physical symptoms that are reported by our school administrators are related to stress and lifestyle diseases. We know from research that all of this makes up the social determinants of health, and they have long-term ramifications for our ability to live long and strong. Okay, so in Delaware, we have conceptualized our mindfulness partnership with Pure Edge within a community resilience model. We're clear that none of us are well unless all of us are well. So to achieve this, we began with a shared understanding of toxic stress and adversity. We use that to build a foundation for capacity building with our educators, but we've also extended that to all of our education partners. So our community centers, out of school time partners, as well as parents and caregivers are included and invited to our professional learning to create a state of readiness for our entire school community, but our community at large. And with those cross-sector partnerships, we want to have an engaged community. Our intent is to build a set of champions for children, okay? Oh, I'm so sorry. Build a set of champions for children, and to have those champions go out and advocate for policies and practices that build a stronger community, but also support whole child development. So when I was hired about 2.5 or so years ago, it followed our governor signing Executive Order 24 to make Delaware a trauma-informed state. But all of us know that by signing the order, that would not make it so. So with the Department of Ed, we created a capacity building document that followed the trajectory from awareness to informed, and integrated all of our strategies to reduce barriers to the non-academic barriers to learning within that capacity building trajectory. And that includes our mindfulness work, social and emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, culturally responsive pedagogy, restorative practices, as well as all of our supports to create equitable and just schools. Next slide, please. Concurrently, we also became one of CASEL's collaborating states in December of 2018. Okay, with the support of grassroots stakeholders, we created the Delaware SEL Collaborative and set goals for a 3-year plan to develop SEL competencies. They were completed January of 2020. We also, for the last year, have been crosswalking those competencies with the academic standards, making sure they were aligned with our preschool SEL standards. And now we're about to move into creating SEL toolkits so that we have a seamless integration of our academic content standards with our SEL competencies. We truly believe that, SEL is the plate. It's where everything else should rest. And we know that learning is absolutely social as well as emotional. Next slide. We know that you can't jump over the adults to impact the students. So we are clear that we have to pour into our adults so that they have a full well to pour out from to invest in our students. We partner with Pure Ed since 2019 to offer culture of care trainings throughout our state. We've provided all of our educators subscriptions to the Headspace app since that time, as well as offered countless professional learning opportunities on the power of breathing to relax and integrating SEL and mindfulness-based stress reduction strategies. Over the last year, Pure Edge has supported us by offering weekly sessions at multiple times throughout the week for our educators, parents, and community members. And we have increased accessibility by making sure that sessions were offered in American Sign Language, as well as English and Spanish.
We're so excited. And part of the work, and just so you know, our foundation, we were a private operating foundation. And what we do is we actually donate all these services to the Department of Ed of Delaware. And Teri has just been an incredible partner for us, and just being able to provide that. And so this part, I just want to, we've been talking about stress. We've been talking about all of these sort of impacts on our long-term health and well-being. And just a definitional, so we're all sort of anchored in the same definition of stress and what stressors are. And we know that, and we also know that stress, there's good stress and bad stress, right? We need the stress in order to our fight and flight to just sort of get up and moving. It motivates us, it promotes well-being, and enhances our performance. It's really at the top of that U curve. So if you see right where the benefits start to turn into detriments, is when we start to feel that there's no relief in sight. It makes us physically sick. It weakens our immune system and impairs our performance. It's that piece of the stress, when it goes from good stress to detrimental stress, that we actually really start to build in this notion of our allostatic load, where we feel that the bricks, and we all carry this imaginary backpack, and every time we have a stressor, it's the wear and tear in our bodies, everything from a crisis, from work, from health, a pandemic. Every time we add a stressor into our backpack, that allostatic load gets heavier and heavier. And it's when the backpack is almost impossible to carry that it slows us down, is what we are actually talking about, these chronic, repeated, additions to that kind of weigh us down, literally and figuratively. So what I'd like to do just for, for us right now, what we're really trying to get at is listening to our bodies. What is our body communicating to us? And so what I'd love for you to do right now in the chat box is tell us where you feel stress in your body. Where do you feel it? And if you just put it in the chat box, that would be great. Where do you feel stress in your body? Yep, stomach, lower back, jaw. Yeah, a lot of tension. Yeah, head, neck, and I'm sure it has a lot to do with us sitting in front of computers as well, between our shoulders. Yeah. I already feel myself sitting up a little straighter just from reading these. Yeah, lightheadedness, shoulders, and riding through your gut and your head. So we do our physical pieces, right? We're feeling it in our body, and we do know that all of those feelings of stress and that are showing up in our body, we do know that it can also increase the level of cortisol in our body as well. And we know definitively from multiple research studies that stress is actually contagious. You know that as school educators, if colleagues, if you walk into a stressful classroom and it's chaotic, your stress level goes, and there's an energy. But they found in the research by Dr. Kimberly Schernert-Reichel that teachers who reported self-reported stress and burnout, they took cortisol samples from their students in their classrooms, and their cortisol levels, the stress hormone, was actually increased in those classrooms. So we do know that it's contagious. Teri mentioned it earlier about secondary trauma, compassion fatigue, what you do for a living, caring for others, being empaths, right? You have all of this sort of ability to have such open hearts and minds to take care of the children and the communities in which you serve. But on top of that, you have your own set of, stressors that you're dealing with. And so oftentimes we have our own stressors and we're taking in and supporting students, and we're taking on their load as well. We do know that that's something that we try to be very explicit about, that we are imploring you and asking that you really take care of yourself, because how you show up, how you take care of yourself, we want you around for a long time. And that really is only possible when you focus on the ways in which you are doing the least selfish thing, is by allowing the self-care to take place. And oops, going the wrong way, sorry about that. And we do know that the real enemy of high performance is actually not stress. We've talked about that. It's been in the studies. It's been sort of studied. But these two gentlemen, Jim Lawler and Tony Schwartz, they wrote an article about 20 years ago called The Making of a Corporate Athlete. And what they actually ended up doing was studying high performance professional athletes. And what they found is they were training, but they gave their bodies time to rest and restore. So they're actually training for these big games, but their actual performance time is relatively small in comparison to the amount of training we do. But for educators, we are performing, and we actually don't have any of the training, or we don't intentionally have these reserves stored for our chronic stress. And so that's where we want to sort of push you to think about, what do you do for yourself where you can actually create a reserve that allows you, when you are incredible at getting stressed, what do you do to actually restore yourself? And because we do know from the research that when you restore yourself, that has a reciprocity impact for the folks around you. We shared a little bit about where you feel stress in your body. What I'd like to do is actually ask you in the chat box to let us know where you feel joy in your body. Where do you feel joy in your body? Yep, your heart and head. And if it's taken you a little while to figure out where you feel joy in your body, that's actually wired in your DNA, because we are wired for a certain type of thinking. It takes a little bit longer. You're probably like, oh, I've never really thought about that. Where do I feel it? And we're going to share just a little bit about why. And we do know, this is we're talking about breath, about healing. How we breathe matters. And so for us, one thing that we're going to try and push you all to think about is your nasal breathing. I know we never really think about our nose, of how we use it, but nasal breathing and extended breaths out, the exhales, and light, soft breathing is actually seen and shown that it improves health outcomes for yourself. We tend to overbreathe. We do also know that nasal breathing has been one of those things where it's been neglected for decades. And the nasal breathing passageways, right? You have all of those little hairs, the filters. It's actually intended to do that, to take in air, hold in carbon dioxide, exhale carbon dioxide as well. But when you solely focus on nasal breathing for as much of the time as possible, it actually has huge health benefits. Mouth breathing actually is what the majority of the folks in our country do, is mouth breathing. It actually depletes us and has long-term health impacts in different ways. There's a lot of studies right now in oxygen advantage. There's a research out, Breath by James Nestor, which is this is where the information is taken from. He's spent 10 years researching these from thousands of years of text and things like that, just going back and finding, but really having mouth breathing be related to a lot of long-term health ailments. And so really pushing us to think about nasal breathing as a strategy for health improvement. And these are just some of the ways in which we can allow our breath to help us move a little better in the space. But we also know that nasal breathing is one of the ways in which we can actually activate our parasympathetic nervous system faster than others. If you start to think about the actual practices that you're engaging in with mindfulness, what we're really trying to do is go from that sort of agitated state of fight or flight and really going into a homeostasis and going into rest and digest. And you're going to notice, if you're doing things in a way that allows you to go into rest and digest quickly, you'll notice a little, if you're doing nasal breathing, you're going to notice a little pool of saliva in your mouth, and you already know that you've activated your parasympathetic nervous system. It's one of the sort of real tangible indicators that you are activating it strongly.
Awesome. So we know that we are making an investment in our health when we do our nasal breathing. And so we encourage y'all to breathe deeply enough, and as Chi said, regularly enough to impact the functioning of the vagus nerve. When we do that, we relax the parasympathetic nervous system and we send a flood of oxygenated, love-filled blood into every organ system of the body. So what I'm hoping you'll do is join me in doing one of the breathing activities that we've learned from our time with Pure Edge. If you all have read chapter 38, you know that this did not come easily for me. I, like many educators, was so focused on my students that I forgot to take time for myself. And it was through an exasperating period of overload in my work as a school psychologist that I really was forced to take a pause and really look at develop myself and develop practices for longevity of my career and my physical health. So if you will, I invite you to join me on the edge of your seats. Sit up straight if you can. I'm going to walk us through even in, even out. Okay. If some people might start in a seated position on the floor in mountain, but we want you to just have a nice tall spine with relaxed shoulders and gently close your eyes if you feel comfortable. You'll breathe naturally through the nose, and we're going to focus on making our inhales and exhales even. And so on one, breathe in, breathe out. 2 counts, breathe in, breathe out. 1, 2. For 3 counts, breathe in and breathe out. 3, 2, 1. Breathe in on 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And breathe out. 3, 2, 1. And 5. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. I hope that was refreshing. Mindfulness is simply noticing what's happening as it's happening. The key is to notice without judgment. We want to maintain a sense of curiosity and grace, okay, that supports a growth mindset. Next slide. Principal Baruti Kafele says that it's not just about skill, that the work that we do takes skill and will. And the question for me became, do we actually have the will to do what we know is best for our school communities? Mindfulness supports equity and inclusion. It levels the playing field. It's a portable skill, and it assures that our breath, our emotions, our regulation, our problem solving are all accessible at all times. These are a few of the frameworks, performance frameworks, that are actually using and incorporating mindfulness practices. Mindfulness is an adaptive force, all right? And we are using it to fortify our MTSS. Mindfulness makes room, a room where all of us are welcome to explore who we are and what makes us tick. We all have biases, okay? And bias is inherent into our makeup, okay? We have a slant towards paying attention to the negative, all right? And so as much as possible, we have an opportunity to use that information to create a new way of exploring in the world. Our negativity bias can take shape in the form of excessive worry, anxiety, frustration, judgments, and it sometimes leads us to expect danger. But through our mindfulness practices, we can cultivate an awareness for incorporating safety into spaces, okay? Through our mindfulness practice, we create safe, accessible spaces where we can move from being threatened by differences to tolerating and ultimately appreciating differences, so our schools and communities are physically, psychologically, and emotionally safe for everybody.
And so as part of what we talk about at the very beginning about, where you feel stress in your body, it was so easy to identify how stress is impacting you. And it took you a little bit longer to figure out where you feel joy in your body. And so one of the things that we do know in terms of the mindfulness experience is really being able to identify. We know that it's wired in our DNA to look for danger and trouble because we're trying to survive. It's been sort of the way in which we have survived. But as we start to go through, how we live in our day-to-days, especially with the pandemic, right? Trying to find ways in which we have to switch because we know our body and our mind takes negative experiences and they just stick to us like Velcro. Like 20 years of an argument that we had 20 years ago is still sticking in my brain. That is a very powerful emotion. But when we actually, what we do know is that it takes a lot longer for a positive experience to really stick with us. And so we want to try, and you know this better than anyone, just the folks that have joined us today, when you show gratitude, you take in the good, it does something very specific in our brains, and it allows us to see the good quicker, find the joy quicker than what we're normally used to. We also know the research is really clear as well, that kindness can change the brain. The brain's default mode is rest and digest, but because we're always on the go, we're going from one Zoom room to the next and trying to get all these things together. We do know that being kind, it actually, we can actually move from threat mode back into rest and digest. We do know that the studies have shown that kindness can have lasting and positive impacts on our physical and mental health. That's why I think Teri and I worry so much about the educators who give of yourself so freely. You are living empaths, but it also can take a terrible toll on you when you're taking all that in. And we also want to just remind you that kindness to yourself is just as important to kindness as others. And we strongly believe that when you do take care of yourself in ways that that are going to allow you to have a longer life, without long-term health ailments. So we just know that we want you to be around for a long time, doing what you do so beautifully and so well. And just as a reminder from two strangers, maybe for you, but just that you matter. And we just want to make sure we remind you of that. And we do know that Thich Nhat Hanh has, he's got so many wonderful ways in which he's shared his knowledge, but just want to remind you, when you plant lettuce that does not grow well, you don't blame the lettuce. You look for reasons it's not doing well. It may need fertilizer, more water, less sun, but you never blame the lettuce. And we hope for us, this is one way that we look for how we support adults, but most importantly, how those adults show up to support children. Just trying to change the conditions for success. And the reason why we believe that this reciprocity of self-care allows us to build more equitable environments is how we show up for others and how we create these spaces of safety and relationships. That's really why we do the work that we do. So Teri and I'd like to give you a chance, just in the chat box, to have just a reflection point of what's one step you can take to share your practice to ignite self-care of those you love. And just in the chat box, just give yourself a moment. What's one thing or what's one step you can take to ignite self-care for either yourself or for others that you love? Yeah. Going outside, and that research is really clear, right, Ashley, that being out in nature actually reduces your cortisol, just walking. Yeah. And I know Teri talked about the sitting as a new smoking. There is research out right now. There's a meta-analysis about exercise, and they say 11 minutes of movement a day can actually have really positive impacts as well. So 11 minutes, that's sort of the magic number, is really 30 to 40 minutes of exercise. It doesn't have to be huge or high intensity, but just getting yourself to move a little bit. 11 minutes is actually the turning point and key. That's great. Yeah, lots of walks, playing with the dogs. Yep. Yes, and we are not going for perfection. I think that's super important. Right, Jill, I think that is such a great point. We are not going for perfection. We're just trying our best. And so to be kinder to yourselves for sure. Yes, it's wonderful. Yes, progress, not perfection. All right. So these are just some of the resources. As we share, Teri and I do this because we love it. We also want to make sure that we guide you through any places that have free resources, right? We want to make sure that, sorry, I'm just kissing my dog on the lips. Andy, I don't, it just made me smile. But all the free resources that we have on our website, Delaware Department of Ed, Teri's done a beautiful job of having their resources up and on their site, and we have ours at Pure Edge as well. And We hope that you stay connected with us. We are around, and we'll stay around if you have any questions, or if you'd like to ask any questions, where you can always turn on your mic and just sort of chime in. But here's our contact information. We'd love to hear from you. And again, all of the resources that we provide are free and open source. We have our resources in English and in Spanish, and all of the sessions that Teri mentioned that we've done for Delaware Department of Ed are on our website, as well as recorded the sessions, so on-demand webinars as well. And again, it's all free, open source. So please join us if you can. Okay. Any questions, thoughts, feedback? And Andy, now you have to show us your dog. I feel like.
I will see if I can track him down. This is usually when he's kind of like napping in one of his spots.
No,
So,
we never wake up a sleeping dog.
yeah.
It's like a baby. Does anyone have any questions for us or any feedback? Teri and I are here, and we'd love to just connect with you personally. It's so nice to actually be in a space where we can see your beautiful faces.
Hello.
Hi, Valerie.
Hi. I am from Delaware. I am a counselor in one of the districts in Northern Delaware, and I didn't know. I've been aware of Pure Edge, and I have seen the free resources. But are there trainings available?
From Pure Edge?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have SEL and mindfulness with SEL and self-care. There's a whole slew of them. I just want to plug one thing. We have webinars since the pandemic. You're probably going to think we're nuts, but since the pandemic hit, we've actually had, by the end of March, we'll have hosted 600 webinars.
Oh my gosh.
They're all free. We are a party of 7, and we just keep at it as much as possible. But they're all free. So there's trainings, there's webinars and things, but I just want to give you a plug. So James Nestor is going to join us for a book talk and fireside chat. If you have not read his book, Breath, it is a great read. There's a lot of science, a lot of research. He's a great fun read because he's funny as well, which is also helpful when we're talking about these strategies. But he'll be with us. If you go on I'm trying to think.
Yeah,
He'll be with us March 23rd, right?
Yeah, March 23rd. And
Yeah.
Valerie, we also, Pure Edge has hosted Dr. Patricia Jennings, Mark Brackett. A number of our book studies were with support from Pure Edge. We've done Permission to Feel. Oh my gosh, there have been 12 book studies going. Since we went to quarantine, we started out with Pure Edge doing about 4 sessions a week. We went to 3 during the summer, 2 starting in September, and then we've slowly gone down to 1 session a week, but making sure that all week long we are able to support our adults, educators, as well as family members in becoming better regulated, but also knowing why. Because if you go to my webpage, we've been really clear that while we can stimulate the mind and engage the heart, we are focused on moving the hands to action. What does it take to get people to apply these things to their daily practice? Because that's what impacts students.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
We also have, for those of you who don't know, we also have 1,200 pages of curriculum that you'll never use, but it's there, it's free. It's broken up in pre-K through grade 2, 3 through 5, and then we've got 6 through 12. We have a series of videos. So we have new ones that we've produced as well for mindful movement. So we have it's a free movement class. So we call that virtual PE. So the HPE teachers can actually download those for elementary and for middle school. And we've got that. And then we have a new series, the brain breaks that we've recorded. We've actually re-recorded them to have just to be a little more visually appealing. So those are there as well. But we've got, Teri's been great. She's been doing a couple of our webinars with us with Dr. Carrion, whom we work with at Stanford University. So just a nice mix. And again, for us, we know that you know how to do these things better than we do. We just want to try and make it as accessible so we get as many folks as possible just to join the movement, right? Taking care of yourself, being more present, being more mindful so that we're better serving our communities is really why and what we're doing. but most importantly for us is that we do know that the education sector is so stressed in the nation that we try to make sure that taking care of the educators is our first priority, right? And having educators stay in the profession is hugely important. And right now with the pandemic, that is something that is being questioned. You know, am I staying, am I going? Are the pressures too hard? So anything that we can do to alleviate any of that and just to be supportive, again, we're so happy to help. So just thank you for doing what you do. It's just, it's a gift to the communities in which you serve. Anything else? One strategy I want to share with you, the reason why we focus on neuroscience of stress and not mindfulness specifically is because we work in deep red and deep blue states. And because we have to present in a way that is, you know, secular, it's also a universal. Everyone experiences stress. When people find out what stress does to the body in a very coherent and sort of physiological way with the neuroscience, and they go through a couple of breathing exercises, that there's no, you know, it's just counting, it's using your nose, the pieces that we have in place, they are more likely to actually seek a path towards trying to get more strategies towards mindfulness. And so I just wanted to make sure you knew how we approach the work. There are so many great organizations that actually start mindfulness, including, you know, this one and mindfulschools.org. Those are all very personal practices that take place. But what we do is we actually go in with districts and state agencies so that we go into scale. So we have currently about, in the last year, we've served about 50,000 people. It's close to 60 now, I think. And just from January to now, we've already had close to 12,000 people show up for our webinars. And so for us, it's really trying to be a little bit of a gateway to the opportunity to just focus on your breath, you know, enjoy that space in between, and really just, you know, finding that moment where, look, however you approach self-care, we just want to give you some resources that won't cost you any money, just a little time, right? And if you can do 2 or 3 minutes a day, start. Remember, 11 minutes of movement, even in your chair, getting up and down, anything like that. Again, we don't want sitting to be the new smoking. We want we want just to be able to have a little bit of motion and momentum. So
I'd like to add that the neuroscience was really a unifier for us when it came to all of our work.
Yeah.
That once we started talking about strengthening the brain and reducing the impact of stress in the body, with the neuroscience, it took these practices away from what we do from the kids over there or in that school or that zip code to how do we build up and create more resilient students and schools everywhere. And that took it, I think, to an equity practice. And so we're really excited because that really helped us stop needing to sell the work and help people understand that it's our responsibility to create stronger brains, not only for ourselves, but for all of our children.
Yeah, I do, Teri, that's so important, that framing, because, you know, just the word mindfulness alone, there is a group of attorneys, conservative attorneys, that are actually going literally by school board agendas across the country. And if the word mindfulness or meditation is in the board agenda and the school boards are purchasing, you know, either online programs or platforms, or they are actually providing lawsuits. So the gift of lawsuits from these conservative folks that believe that we're, you know, damaging in a different way, as if, you know, breath is going to harm their children. So I feel like that's where we have to be super careful about how we approach. And for a lot of people who are very spiritual, mindfulness doesn't resonate with them, but neuroscience does and stress reduction does. So it's not sneaky in any way. It's really just being very upfront and objective about how we're approaching the work. And so, and then that equity lens too, right? One thing that we do know from Dr. Greenberg, Mark Greenberg, and Tish Jennings and folks who are experts in the space of mindfulness, they're very clear that when we ask children to do these things, right, mindfulness is really an invitation, but for young children, we're really not inviting them into mindfulness if we are actually having that being done in the classroom. So being able to figure out how to approach that where it's not seen as, you know, another thing that we're doing unto kids, it's really trying to figure out what's the best way to approach the work so that that we can share some strategies, right? This shouldn't be a disciplinary procedure. I think I get the most frustrated when districts decide to have mindfulness programs after kids have gotten suspended from the classroom. It's just these, so it's just unfortunate. So for us, it's really trying to figure out, how do we support you as adults? And then how do the adults support themselves in a classroom to show up in a way that you can be much more responsive? And then and sort of reducing the reactivity. And then how do we show some of these strategies to young children and young people so that we allow them to create some of their own agency and empower them to, really show up in a space where they can be more responsive. So it's really sort of that chain, that reciprocity that we keep talking about. So.
Sorry, I've actually even stopped talking about it as a tool to it's a toy. Like, it's not a toolbox, it's a toy box, because we want to maintain that youthful curiosity that helps us, seek learning in the first place, building up coping strategies, having different ways to problem solve and different ways to engage with other people. That's a part of expanding our consciousness, expanding our interactions with the world. That's what we want as kids get older and as they grow and learn. And so, I mean, I'm excited for what I see happening in our schools, and that just inspires me to try to push it and spread it more.
Yeah, it's been, I don't know if you, when you try and actually, I don't know if any of you have approached it with folks who've never done anything just intentional. They're doing things all the time, but just with the intentionality. And when you start to show them, when you do nasal breathing and you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system and say, okay, now is there a pool of saliva building up in your mouth? Just that little connection, like, whoa, yeah, why? And then it's that little piece where they're getting that feedback, right? So your body is always communicating with you, always. Are we listening? And if that is the moment, that space of listening, if that can change someone to, even give it a shot or give it a try, is always best. But just because I've been reading James Nestor's book and getting ready for his book talk, I just want to put a plug in for light breathing. Not huge amounts of oxygen, but really light nasal breathing in, light nasal exhales out. That also is showing that we're also over breathing, so we're taking in too much. And that little light breathing, practicing our nasal breathing, they're actually getting these, there's studies out right now about prevention of coronavirus as well. I mean, who knows, right? But having that nasal passageway do its job. The nitric oxide they're finding is actually killing some of the virus. So just another piece to see if that's going to show up in the literature soon. So I also
I see a question in the chat box.
Yeah, Teri, it says, can you speak a bit more about the equity lens that you use?
Sure. One, I would like to say that, first of all, my background in school psych has pushed me to want to explore strategies that we use to reduce barriers to learning, period. And that in itself puts an equity lens to everything that we do. When thinking about our students, we've tried to integrate more whole child development practices, really looking at not how do we reduce, in-school suspension or reduce visits to the office and office disciplinary referrals, but how do we build up and create opportunities for kids to grow and learn? And to do that, you have to come not from a place of blame and shame, but from a place of, I know that you have inherent purpose and strengths, and how do I help you maximize that in school? And so we have started, building in protective factors, looking really specifically at the positive childhood experiences that are necessary for students to thrive, and making sure that we're creating more of those opportunities as opposed to the ones that are going to stick like Velcro and reinforce a negative bias. But all of that informs, I think, our equity approach to the work that we're doing. These are portable practices. These are not things that are just used in school or a school setting. These are skills that students need as they move into their communities, whether that's the suburbs or some of our most dangerous streets in our inner city. And I want to create space for kids to use and employ those skills so that they can create emotional safety, even in places where they are not experiencing physical safety. And so that I think that's a part of how we are bringing equity to bear in this work.
Yeah, and one of the things that Teri and I talk about quite often is really how do you asset frame all these conversations, right? We're not bringing these strategies to help broken people. We're really just bringing this awareness of where to start just from yourself and the human experience. And I think that part of just the framing of what we can do. We also know there's literature out there that, mindfulness is not for everyone. And so especially, particularly if they come from high trauma backgrounds and you're trying to implement a program, it could actually be re-traumatizing. The literature is also really clear that if you're not mindful yourself and you're trying to bring mindfulness into a classroom, thou shalt meditate is really not going to work for kids. So there's just a real nuanced way, and that's why we focus on the adults, bringing your best selves to the table first. And when we have that, I think that's when you sort of start to see the reciprocity and the magic, because it really isn't about, at least for me in particular, it's not about you trying to put mindfulness programs in your classrooms for the kids. It's about allowing ourselves to have the space to notice, to present in a way that allows me as an adult to have better relationships with the young people that I serve. And it's that relationship building, that trust that can only come from a place where your heart is, showing. Kids are so intuitive. So we're just excited to have you be a part of this. And if, like I said, with Teri and myself, anything that we can do to be helpful, please feel free to reach out.
I had a question about all those wonderful worksheets you have as part of your free curriculum. Like who was part of that? I mean, that was really drew me into when I'm like, this is all free, like so helpful. The frogs and the dragons, and it just was such a playful way for the younger grades. So I don't know if you have one of those you could screen share. I don't know, but it was.
I don't have one right now. Actually, I think the one that we showed, I'll show you this right here.
Oh,
We have a whole series actually. Let me see. I wonder if I have it.
I'm also trying to find that. I know Teri mentioned chapter 38. She and Teri co-wrote a chapter on how they've partnered to have Delaware become a trauma-informed state. So definitely check that out.
And Tracy, just to answer your question, so she's talking about this frog right here on the screen. We have a whole series of these little movement cards that we've created for young children. That one you have to sign up for an account. But again, the signing up for the account is free as well. That's how I'm held accountable for the work that we do in terms of getting accounts. But please feel free. It's on pureedgeinc.org. It's under curriculum. It's a free account. We've got all these downloadables. And just to answer your question, there's a team of folks, really yoga instructors is how it started, and creating these spaces and little, just any kinds of little supports that you can use in your classroom. We have this great partnership with a school in New York City, Dawn Brooks DaCosta. She's just a phenomenal principal, and we work with TMOLs, and we've got their itty bitties who their parents allowed them to do our movement sequences as first graders. So super, super cute. But
we've made them available to our early child care, early education educators, as well as our child care centers. We also have the curriculum available to everyone K-12. The intent is to have full alignment and coherence in our toy box from preschool all the way to adulthood.
It looks like we're getting our little time check. I know you all need to go eat and get yourself restored, maybe take a little walk, kiss your dog on the lips, Andy, and then we all, but thank you so much, everyone. It's such a pleasure to meet you and see you. Teri, do you have any last thoughts before we?
Yeah, look forward to seeing everyone again. And more than anything, just take good care of yourselves, stay focused on your own breathing, and live long and strong.
That's right. Yeah, it's always, Teri, we always get stuck between our session and lunch. It's always us and food.
Yeah, there's something there.
It's so great. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful weekend. Tracy, thanks again for the honor of being able to be a part of this.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Chi. Thanks, Teri.
Bye. Take care.